We're here. All right. My name is Waylon Lewis, and I am honored to be here with this lady, Wendy Stern.
Hi.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So maybe we'll get a little closer to the camera, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. So what do you do with your whole life? Sorry. You have to face each other.
Well, that's a big question.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to start with saying that I'm a mom.
Yeah.
And I have 2 children,
Nice.
and I want a husband.
Nice.
And
that sounds pretty good.
It is. It's actually the most important part of my life.
How old are your children?
I have an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old daughter.
Right.
Hannah and Layla.
Great ages.
Yes, and my husband, Brian. So that is the center of my world. But apart from that,
You're doing a lot of stuff, which is what we're here to talk about.
Yeah.
So what have you created?
Well, I've created the Grief Support Network.
Okay. So grief support. So grief is something many of us go through. All of us probably touch in with at the very least.
Yeah.
Some of us go deep into it. What inspired your path or you to work with grief?
Well,
if I may.
I'll start by saying everyone at some point in life will touch that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's pretty universal. And what inspired this for me specifically is I lost my first child. I lost my son, Noah, almost 10 years ago. And that was a life-changing experience.
And how old was he?
He was 9 months.
Wow. And can I ask how that happened?
You know, we'll never actually know the true cause of his death, to be honest.
It was like an overnight thing, or?
He honestly stopped breathing one morning while I was nursing him.
Wow.
And there was a little bit of history with some health stuff, but nothing that really made sense with this. And for me, over the years, I've created my own spiritual understanding of why he left. And the truth is, he was this enormous presence in a tiny body. He was bigger than life. And he, in some ways, he just was never of this earth. And he had these qualities of just being able to see right into the depths of someo's soul.
At 9 months old?
Yes.
Wow.
And
so even what we're doing right now is quite rare. It feels quite powerful. Like talking about grief as a culture is not something we really do. It feels impolite, right?
Exactly.
So what was your journey in, I mean, obviously just in a very immediate sense, losing your child while breastfeeding at 9 months old.
Yeah.
What happened emotionally or spiritually?
It cracked me wide open.
Yeah.
And at first, it was just this feeling of being completely broken. And up until this point in my life, nothing bad had ever happened to me. I've lived a pretty charmed life. And my husband and I had been together since we were 19. We lived in Rollinsville, up in the mountains.
Wow.
We lived a pretty
mountain town.
Yeah, we lived a pretty simple life. So this was just the rug being ripped out from underneath us, completely grounded us. And our immediate instinct was we need to get out of here. And we felt immediately, I think.
And that's all of us, right? Whether it's a hard relationship moment or.
Well, we just felt like the culture we were in didn't know how to be with us. People were so uncomfortable with us and our grief.
In the town?
Everywhere. I wouldn't just say it was Rollinsville. Our friends showed up. I want to say that big time. Our friends rallied.
But even when people try, that feels painful too,
people were actually afraid to talk about it with us. And that was just what our culture doesn't know how to do.
So do you recommend, I'm just jumping into that, do you recommend that if friends have a loved one who has just gone through something, that they try, even if it's clumsy, to really check in? Yes,
there's this misconception that you shouldn't bring up the name because it's going to hurt them. But what they don't realize is you're already thinking about it. There was no way I wasn't thinking about it. So when people would say his name, it was like a relief to just be able to be real.
Because it was acknowledging the truth.
Exactly, it's acknowledging the truth. And
do you think that's the same for everyone going through grief? Or, is that an advice? You say just really be there.
I would say be there, be real, be authentic. If you don't know what to say you don't know what to say. But it's better than shying our tongue back.
Say you don't know what to say is very powerful.
Exactly. And here's what we did. We left the country a few weeks later. And we traveled to Bali and to Thailand. And
you had no other children?
We had no other children.
Okay, so
we were just
walked the earth. Yeah.
And what we found was that other cultures dealt with this very differently. And the biggest thing I found, besides just the rituals and some of the ways they actually dealt with it, is the way people just their understanding of death was that it's a part of life.
Right.
And they weren't afraid of it. So what people did is they would lean in towards us rather than do this thing where they pull away. And that was really significant.
Yeah. It's funny because I grew up in the Buddhist community here in Boulder, and Buddhism in the West has a sort of marketing problem.
Yeah.
In the sense that it like literally starts with like life is suffering, and then Americans are like, we're out. Yeah. We're going to like some positivity thing. But it's not considered a bad thing in Buddhism to acknowledge how hard and sad and heartbreaking life can be. And you don't have to avoid it. You can actually. Exactly.
So in these Hindu and Buddhist cultures we were in, we found like we were really embraced in our pain, and it gave us permission to feel our feelings. And that is honestly the most powerful teaching I have for moving through grief, is to be able to feel them, not just like in your body.
To be able to stick with it and feel it. So is that really hard, or is it okay? It sounds really hard.
It's really hard
because everything in you wants to like run away.
But here's the thing: it's harder in the long run to disconnect, because eventually you got to be open.
Exactly.
Everybody does at some point.
On our Instagram, we have like 500,000 followers on Forecast. Whenever we talk about politics or healthcare or anything, people are like, "I'm here for spiritual inspiration and an escape. I'm not here for like to hear about politics or reality stuff." And we're always saying,
it's all together.
It's part of life.
It's part of life.
It's affecting people, and empathy is actually can kind of take you through.
And the thing about grief is because it does crack you open. And within that comes a few things. One is, in my experience, it literally can increase the capacity of your heart. So you learn to feel more of everything. You learn to love more, and you learn to have gratitude for things that you may have never even considered, because you know what it's like to have lost.
Wow.
So grief, is, in my opinion, is really a catalyst for transformation and for doing the deep dive work of personal growth.
So do you, in going into your grief and your husband going into his grief and your grief together, did it change the grief into something more empathetic and, well, I don't want to say happy, but did it transform the grief in some way, or do you still feel that same grief, or both?
Well, I mean, I want to say both. I mean, and also say we've dealt with it very differently, my husband and I. We're very different people,
right?
And we've had very different experiences, but we've done it side by side.
That's powerful.
I will say, for both of us, though, is absolutely transformed our grief into more love. And that's the word that always kind of comes to me.
Wow.
And I think that our relationship, the statistic for couples who lose a child is like 92% end of divorce. That's what it was at least a few years ago.
And why is that? Is it just it's so you deal with it differently?
You deal with it differently, and both are in such a heightened state. It's hard to be together.
It's hard not to get angry or blame.
But it can also make you closer than anything you can imagine if you come together. And we were lucky enough to have the foundation to begin with that made us closer than ever. And we had, well, here's the other thing. We got pregnant with my daughter Hannah in Bali our second week there. So it was a month after Noah died that we conceived Hannah. I know.
This is like a reincarnation, not directly, but wow.
So talk about love, bringing another being into the world. It's certainly,
right.
I mean, things happen quickly.
You had to then show up and.
Yeah, she gave me a reason to get out of bed.
Right.
So I had a reason to live.
Right.
And I think because of that, she gave me this reason to do my work. And the thing I haven't spoken to yet is that my yoga mat was my sanctuary through this. The travels were amazing and inspiring, and getting pregnant kept me here on this planet. But it was my yoga mat that became like my absolute sanctuary that literally saved my life.
So, and I practice yoga, but why? What about that yoga mat was that sanctuary?
Well, yoga gives us a container within ourselves to be present and to feel. And like you said, with grief, it's instinct to just want to avoid pain. We all want to avoid suffering because it hurts, right? When I would come into my practice, it gave me this way to come in and to feel my feelings in my body, to feel my grief, to feel all the emotions that were there. And even though it was painful, it was mandatory for me to start to come back into the world and to live again. And it gave me this opportunity for like deep self-study. So it wasn't just about the grief after that. It was about like all my shadow work. It forced me to go in. And what I believe about—
Sounds so hard.
It's hard. But here's the thing about suffering. Yeah. It's the reason I went into the deeper work is it was excruciating to be where I was.
Right.
I was in pain. And so in order to avoid my own suffering, I had to go deeper. I had to look deeper, and I had to find a way
in order
access.
to avoid your own suffering.
Yeah, I had to change. Is what I'm trying to say.
Right. In order to deal with it.
Or to deal with it.
Not avoid it necessarily.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly it.
To avoid being stuck in it.
Exactly.
Right.
I had to change.
Right.
And change meant being willing to look at parts of myself that I probably would have never looked at. And through that, you get to know yourself better, and you grow. So this is what I find is the incredible opportunity that actually exists in the grieving process.
This is super personal, but I know you do this work. Were you super, I mean, I would feel so afraid having a new child, your second child, after having gone through that. Did you have that kind of fear, or was it?
Well,
and if so, how did you deal with it?
Well, I have a history of anxiety even before all this. So it's a daily practice to keep that kind of fear in check. And I don't feel it so much in my life right now. And I think that, I'll share in my lineage. My mother lost her first child, and my great grandmother lost her first child. Wow. So it's a little bit in my DNA, this worry gene.
Wow.
Especially around children.
Right.
But I think that with that awareness and looking at the incredible woman that my mother is and what she's done with her life, I think I was aware of that coming in, and it's not something that gets in my way. I have it in check, just those fears. And again, it's a practice that keeps me centered. It keeps me away from spinning out with all those fears. And yeah, it pops up sometimes, but it's not at the forefront of my mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in the Buddhist tradition, we kind of have no problem with fear or anxiety. Not that it's easy, but in the sense that it's going to happen, right? And then just what are the tools to work with?
Exactly.
So,
that's what I've looked at.
So out of all this, did you start the Grief Support Network right away or years later?
So
and what is it, and what do you offer?
I'll share. Yeah. So when my daughter was 1.5 years, I just was ready to get back into the world in some way.
Were you still over in Asia?
No, I was home. Okay. We came home. I had her here.
Okay.
We still, a little bit of our journeys, we were on our way to India. My morning sickness was so bad. And my husband is like, there's no way we're going to India. We're going home. So after 6 weeks of travel, instead of 6 months, we came home. Had my daughter Hannah here.
Okay. In Rollinsville?
In Rollinsville, okay. Yep. And when she was 1.5 years, I was ready to go back to work. And what I did was I ran a group for grief parents, the yoga therapy group. And in this group, I used meditation and group connection and yoga as the tools that I knew on how to take specifically grief parents through a grief process. And the thing that was amazing about it.
Caitlin Smar's in there. You can go. Okay.
And
well, since I just interrupted, if anyone wants to ask questions or has comments, we'll address them.
Sure.
Wendy will address them toward the end. And if you give this a like or a love or a funny fist emoticon, that'll help it get beyond the Facebook algorithm, out beyond the choir. So it's a real service to get this important path and tools out there. So thank you for watching.
I decided to run this group. And this yoga therapy group gave me a way to bring people into community. And that was honestly one of those powerful parts of the group, was bring people together. These were all bereaved parents into a circle. Bereaved parents. Bereaved.
Bereaved.
So parents who had lost.
Right.
And there was power in the community.
So in a real day-to-day sense, tell me, you reached out. How did you connect with these people? Did you just reach out and you created a little?
I put out to my network. Well, before I lost Noah, I had been a yoga therapist for about 7 years.
And what is a yoga therapist? Because I've heard it, we talked about this before, but I've heard it often be physical therapist.
This is Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy. And this is a modality that really combines yoga with somatic psychotherapy.
Somatic is body.
Body, yes. So what the practice offers is a way to be supported to go in and to be, the practitioner actually brings you into support stretches. This is just the one-on-one version. And then invites the client to talk about what they're feeling as they're experiencing the postures.
So you're my teacher. I've gone through some grief. I've come to you. And it's a one-on-one thing or group or both?
There's a one-on-one way and a group way.
Do you do partner yoga? Like if it's a couple has gone through a loss?
You can do that too. But the group thing I did was not the one-on-one, and this was more of the community version. But I put out to my network, and it wasn't hard to find people who needed it. And
so you just all got together and shared?
Well, there was a format to it, and I had been trained to run a Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy group. So I didn't make this up initially. I took a model that worked, and I applied it to grieving parents. And what I found was, number one, people coming into community was incredibly healing to know they weren't alone.
Right.
Number two, meditation and yoga.
Number one, alone.
I know.
Like we need
huge.
a moment there because you feel so alone when you've gone through grief. You just want to like fall into a hole, right?
Yeah, and you just want to be acknowledged for what's happening, and rather than always being the elephant in the room. But number two, meditation.
The what?
The elephant in the room.
Yeah,
Gotcha. But number two, meditation and yoga works, especially when we're talking about grief, because grief lives in our bodies. It literally lives in our cells. And when we're trying to work it out in our minds alone or just talking about it, it's hard to move it. It's hard to move through it. And so when we come into our bodies with it, and when we go in using meditation to focus and then yoga to physically open those places, all of a sudden we're able to touch that place and we're able to feel what's there. And through that, we're able to begin to let it move. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's so weird though, because you're overwhelmed by grief or trauma or whatever you're going through, but so many of us use all our energy almost like drowning in it, but at the same time of trying to get away from it.
Yeah.
But then you're saying you actually stop trying to get away from it and you stop drowning in it and you actually just feel it.
And it's almost like, you know that poem, The Guest House? It's like an amazing poem by Rumi, and it basically talks about all moods are welcome. And it's the same kind of idea.
Rumi.
I mean, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's that same idea that, if we're not willing, that these feelings, they actually want to be noticed and felt.
Right.
And it's actually a relief
I saw this
when there's that
lady.
acknowledgement.
Sorry.
Okay.
I saw this lady who I only know vaguely, a barista this morning, getting yelled at by actually a friend of mine who's has a lot going on, and he often gets into kind of conflict with people around town. And he was kind of yelling at everybody. And I looked at her, and she was like very kind of calm and seemed sort of sad. And I kind of checked in with both of them, and I got his drink, and I tried to like help, but I don't think I helped much. But I saw her go. And that's like Tonglen, if you know Tonglen, which I'm sure you do. Pema Children teaches it. It's on Elephant a lot. And do you work with Tonglen, or is that different stuff?
No, it's different stuff, but I appreciate the practice.
Yeah, but it's like really just breathing and feeling and then letting go and giving.
And I want to say the other part of this work, and then I'll say how this evolved in the Grief Support Network, is the element of sharing, and we share in a way that's very specific. It's not like a support group where it's just a conversation. It's allowing each person to express their feelings and to be fully witnessed and received. And there's something really powerful.
And how's that different from just talking in a circle kind of?
Well, because when people don't respond, we call it no crosstalk. When people aren't responding to you and offering their advice or their opinion, we eliminate projection and we allow each person to really own their own experience.
So you would say your experience or feeling, and I and everyone else would just listen?
Yeah, well, the facilitator reflects it back. So there is a response to it.
Okay.
The facilitator basically reflects back the incredible, what the person's saying, but also the light and the potential of each person. So it's deeper than just what they're saying. It's looking even deeper into who they are. So they offer a reflection. And is
it kind of spiritual trippy, or is it super?
Oh, it's real. It's freaking real.
So you're not saying, like, sometimes it drives me nuts.
No.
Some people call it spiritual bypass, but
we talk about spiritual
I hear, there's nothing worse than some sort of clumsy, not feeling it, spiritual mumbo jumbo.
No, there's no spiritual mumbo. This is as real as it gets. This is reflecting back what someone's deep truth, that they're expressing. And it's validating their feelings. So it's validating what's happening for them and reflecting back their life. But the other group, instead of responding, and it's human nature to want to offer advice or suggestions,
I went through that.
To fix. And we invite people not to. And the reason why is that we don't want to disempower people. It's very empowering when you're given a space to access your own wisdom. And the most important part of this program, and this is what's evolved into our From Grief to Gratitude 9-month program, I'll say that too, is having a safe space to come each week where you get to show up as you are. And when you're grieving in the world, it can be really hard to feel so messy all the time, to feel like you have to keep it together, put on a happy face for people to be okay with you.
There's this amazing article, I think Callie is still around, who, she's our editor on duty in the comments. We have an article by Lynn Shattuck, who's one of my favorite writers, if not favorite writer on Elephant. And she's writing about grief. It's funny, I just read it yesterday, and there's this paragraph in it where she's sort of stunned that life just continues. Like the sun comes up, the moon comes up, people go to work, new music is coming out, it's the holidays, everyone's acting like nothing happened, and yet her whole world has changed.
I certainly felt that way.
Yeah.
It's like everyone gets to go back to their life, but you don't, because your life is forever changed. And the thing I'll also say about grief is there's, for many people, an inherent identity crisis that comes with that. This sense of like, wow, I'm not who I was, but who am I? So this is a part of what we support people with.
Oh, so hard.
It is, but you know what though? It's hard, but it's so incredibly beautiful and empowering. Mm-hmm. So people find is, as they're going through that shift of, well, I'm not that anymore, who am I? They find more of themselves. And it's not like, for myself, I didn't like become another person. I actually became more of who I am.
Right. That's the quote. That's the pull-out quote. That's powerful, because people, sorry to keep bringing up, so my Buddhist life, people are always like, well, how can that guy be Buddhist? He's nuts, or whatever. And someone would say, well, you don't become less yourself. You just kind of become almost more yourself, which almost like a caricature of yourself in a way, like you really embody who you are. And it doesn't necessarily make you like your image of like a peaceful monk on a mountain. If your whole thing is like cooking and yelling and being all passionate, maybe you're more that way, but maybe you take yourself less seriously. Like there's a more gentleness to it.
Well, there's an evolution of who you are. You don't become someone else. You know, I recently wrote a blog after getting back from travels in Morocco, Portugal, and Spain just a few weeks ago.
Wow.
And what I was traveling, and I was just so open to these amazing cultures. Travel really does that for me.
Yeah.
It is a good trip. Yeah. But what I'll say is I wrote this blog like the day I got back, because I was just trying to digest this. And I was writing about some of my own grief work that was happening for me on this trip. And the words that came to me was authenticity, self-love, and connection.
And is this grief work around your son? Or is it just grief itself?
No, it wasn't even grief work I was doing on the trip. It was more just like a deeper understanding of where I'm at in my own process and of like what this is about. And the word authenticity and connection and self-love, these are the words that I think are really the heart of grief work, because that's what it can bring us to. So it's not about becoming something else, like you said. It's more about like finding this deep authenticity and being willing to be that in the world.
I guess I'm sort of asking, like, are you, from a naive, ignorant point of view, which was my point of view, there's an assumption, which I am starting to think is totally wrong, that you get through the grief and it's over in a way.
Yeah.
But maybe it just kind of continues for your whole life, but it's different.
I mean, I don't know. I'm still living my life, so I can't tell you what the end point is. For me, it becomes integrated into who I am. And there are moments where it comes up and I touch those really tender places and I can really go there in the dark places that are hard. But for most of my life, you know, I have a relationship with my son. I have a relationship with Noah in a different way. And it adds a lot of meaning to my life. It's like having my own personal angel. So is the grief work done? I mean, probably never.
He is like your personal angel?
Yeah. Yeah. And I have my relationship with him. It's almost like this wise soul who, I mean, honestly, it's hard to have words for it. It's such an important part of my life, an important connection. And it's made me a better person, that whole connection. And I don't think I'll ever be done grieving him. I mean, I'll miss him every day of my life. But I also have two beautiful children.
And you actually miss, I mean, I'm not trying to be callous, but like you feel, it's like you think about him and miss him every day.
I do. But it's not in this like heartbroken, sad way. It's like I feel my heart ache for this beautiful being. But my life is filled up with so many other things. And it's so much more enriched because I know what it feels like to lose, that I have so much more appreciation and gratitude for what I have. So I feel like my ability to be mindful and connected in my life, it's completely changed. So one of the things I've come to understand is that it's not like in spite of the loss, it's because of that you can learn to love this way and feel so much.
How did it change your relationship, your motherhood for your other children?
Wow, that's a
Going
good
through that
question.
grief.
And you know, it's interesting, especially right now, the Grief Support Network, running a nonprofit is not easy. And my children are my priority, 100%. And I'm trying to run this business to bring this work to others, so I'm constantly navigating.
Yeah, you're growing some nationwide network or something, right?
Well, we're working towards it.
So it's a ton of work.
It's a ton of
And
work.
again, if people are interested, I think we put in the comments, but it's griefsupportnet.org.
It is, yeah.
So you're doing all this important work, obviously couldn't feel more important.
Yes.
And at the same time, you have children going through, I don't know, they're 4 and 8.
4 and 8, yeah. And that's where my priority is. And I think that, you know, I understand the preciousness of life. I really do. And I think I do so even more than I would have before, or than I did before. And because of that, I think that my relationship with them, my connection with them, is something that I would just never take for granted. And because of that, it makes me, I mean, of course, I have my moments. And a 4 and 8-year-old is a very busy household.
You always have your moments. We're human, yeah.
But I feel like my connection with them is just, it's like, I don't know, beyond words. Because I understand, again, what it's like to lose. And so I see them.
Right.
And I think those moments when it's hard, I have something to refer back to. Like, oh, thank God I have them. Like, especially when life's hard, I look at my 2 healthy, beautiful children and like, it's enough. You know, it's enough.
Do you find any kind of uptight, I feel like I would, putting myself in those shoes, uptight projection of like, I'm super concerned about their safety all the time.
You know, I work really hard not to do that. It's in there, but
I think I would go there.
Well, I'm honestly sometimes
careful, you know.
If anything, I think I'm a little bit hands off at times because I'm so mindful of not being overbearing. I don't want to be that way.
Good for you.
I don't want to project
And
myself.
that allows them independence and to take care of themselves.
And grief is a conversation in our household that's very open. My children really understand life and death, and they're not afraid of it. My kids are fucking amazing.
That's so cool.
They really are. And it's because we talk about it openly. And I think one thing I'll say to people tuning in, that there's this like misconception that we need to like, hide our grief from our kids because we don't want them to hurt. We don't want to put it on them. But what I've learned is that when you show them your feelings, you give them permission to feel their own. Mm-hmm. So I think
that's so powerful. I feel like it's almost like don't talk about it in front of the kids.
Yeah. And this is part of the cultural thing that the organization is trying to break, that I'm trying to break.
And you're trying to protect them, like it's a good intention.
It's a good intention. It's always a good intention.
Right.
But how it plays out is actually teaching them to stuff their feelings, which isn't good for anybody.
Or sort of saying you can't handle this stuff, so it's very scary.
It is.
It like builds it up.
Exactly. And that's the thing that I've learned from other cultures. They're not afraid of it because it's a part of life. And that's something I think that's really new to our culture and really important to learn how to talk about these things that are real. And then kind of pulling it back into yoga and mindfulness, it's like, and then being able to track in our own bodies. So much of this is like really learning how to find our center and to live our life from that place. And grief can offer us this opportunity. And these groups that I'm offering, this program offering through the Grief Support Network, has been one of the most powerful ways I've found to create impact and to teach people, you know, I don't want to say teach people, it's almost like it's supporting them, it's holding them in a safe place where they can do this deep exploration themselves. And they come to me because they're grieving and they're hurting and they're seeking. But what they get isn't just a way to deal with the grief. It is really this opportunity to like learn more about who they are and to grow through the process. So it ends up becoming way more about kind of their own personal story of transformation than about anything else.
So and
that helps them in the rest of their life, you know?
Yeah.
So we're really teaching people to take what they learn on the yoga mats and to how to really live that in their life.
So in yoga, I feel like a lot of people want to avoid, I mean, we've kind of touched on this, but avoid suffering or avoid neurosis or confusion, just like be happy and, you know, run around with our mats and, you know, but you are basically setting up a thing that says, come to me, all of you bereaved or grieving people. You're constantly taking in people who are gone through the roughest possibly the roughest thing they'll go through their entire life. Yeah. Do you feel like that's a burden, or do you feel like has your path with grief and transforming your relationship to grief transformed your relationship to other people's suffering?
Oh, totally. To be honest, it is not a burden. And for me, it's also the format of how we do it. You know, there's 2 hours a week that I sit with a group in this way. And maybe there's multiple groups going on, but for each group there's 2 hours. And for me, it offers me a container, a place that I can hold them in their experience. But
a container for you and your experience as well?
Yeah, as well. And I find it's a place I can bring my own personal depth and have a place for it to go. Do you know what I mean by that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the wisdom I've learned through the process. And for me, what I'm really doing is reflecting who people are back at them.
Yeah.
And that brings me a lot of pleasure because I love watching people access their own potential. And
do you ever
it's not a burden. I don't hold it, is what I'm saying. I don't hold their grief. I mean, I hold it in a container with them, but I don't
allow
take it
them to acknowledge it and breathe through it. And do you ever feel like what's the hardest case you've ever had? Like people are just stuck in it.
And to be honest, the hardest thing of my job is fundraising. Like I'm fine holding people's
We need a fundraising support network.
We need a fundraising support network for anyone running a nonprofit. That's the hard part for me.
Why is it so hard? Obviously, it's a lot of work, but you're saying more than that.
Well, it's mostly just around how I want to spend my time. I want to spend my time doing grief work with people, and I do.
Right.
And raising money is really important. And a lot of what grief work is doing right now is raising money for people who can't afford these services to make it more accessible. We actually launched something really dear to my heart just this week, which is our Noah Schuyler Fund in honor of my son.
Oh.
Yeah. And
what's Schuyler? His middle name.
Yeah. And we're raising $10,000 to help offset the cost when people can't afford it.
So if people are inspired, you can donate, I assume, at griefsupportnet.org to help, and those donations go to help people who maybe can't afford this 9-month course.
And people can donate specifically into that fund if they want to help.
To the scholarship fund or generally to the organization.
Exactly. And a part of how we're growing right now is to really spread this outside of Boulder. So the other thing we're creating is a teacher training program to take teachers who already have a 200-hour certification and to give them these skills on how to take people through a 9-month process, and to incorporate, the teachings around grief, around empowered grief work, and also supporting people to really do their own grief work as teachers so that when they're sitting with students, they are well equipped to handle anything that may trigger them. So it's kind of personal growth work and teacher training wrapped together as one. And part of our mission is to really spread this way of supporting people. So we're looking to train teachers throughout the country to take this to other places you really need it.
Do you have anything like a weekend program or a way for someone who, has had a loss to touch in with this? That's not a 9-month course.
Absolutely. We have a 6-week introduction course. We're in the middle of one right now. We'll be offering these every other month, throughout 2018. And it's an introduction, but it's not just an introduction. It's like really getting a taste of the work and getting a sense of how it resonates, what the potential is to get from it. And then people can decide from there if they want to do the deeper dive.
Right.
And the truth is, it's actually started as a 6-week program when I started it as a pilot. What we found was it was just enough time for people to dip their toe in.
Wow.
Here's the thing about grief. It's not fast.
Right.
It's not a quick process. It's not like you do a 6-week course and you're healed and you move on.
Right.
It's bigger than that. And so the 6-week is a great way for people to try it on. And then 9 months is really there for those who know that they're ready to commit to themselves. Mm-hmm. And the cool thing about a 9-month program is there is time and there's a consistency of a weekly container. And when people commit to themselves, both financially and physically, they're more willing to show up. Mm-hmm. And so it's so easy to hide under the covers when you're hurting. And some days you do, and that's okay. But this commitment people make to the group, it keeps them accountable to their own healing process, which is power in and of itself.
Yeah.
I'd like to share another program just
Please.
to kind of speak to some of the other aspects of the Grief Support Network.
Please.
We're just at the end of a pilot that we've done for a really cool program that is a meal delivery program. And what we did is we combined two different needs in the community. One is peer support. So we've been training volunteers on how to sit with people who are grieving. So all the stuff we've been talking about, how to listen. It's really like the sacred art of listening we're teaching people, how to hold space for these big feelings. And the idea of bringing a nourishing meal to a family who's just been through a loss. So we put these two pieces together. And what we—
because that's a common thing that is needed when people go through a loss, is the meal.
It's a way to show love and support. And so, and again, this has been a pilot, so we've been kind of trying this on for the last 6 months. And what we found was that, well, first of all, we had 5 restaurants in town donate meals each week, which is incredible.
Nice.
And then we have these amazing volunteers.
Just give them some
I'm
love.
so glad. Shine, Fresh Times, Savory Cuisine, Kathmandu, I'm blanking, the Indian restaurant on Baseline, so awesome. Help me.
The Taj?
Yes.
Yeah.
The Taj.
Taj
And
Mahal.
yes. And I hope I'm not forgetting anybody. I think I got everybody.
If you remember someone, we can put in the blog, so you're fine.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But what we found through this pilot was that, well, it was slightly a logistical nightmare to combine all these things to coordinate the volunteers and restaurants and families. But what we're doing with this—
And you're doing all this, or do you have staff? Or?
I have staff. I have
okay.
But what we're doing with this, and I feel so excited about, is we're kind of teasing these offerings apart, and people can choose kind of from a menu. If people just want a meal delivered, this is something that we raise money for, and we can be able to offer them a meal. But the piece we're focusing on developing even more is the peer support. And this is going to grow into more of a robust program in the next year, where we're going to be matching up individuals who have been through a loss, a specific kind of loss, and are maybe not over it, but they're far enough along where they're in a place of strength. And with someone who's just gone through a loss and they're drowning, and they need someone who can like hold their hand and look them in the eye and say they're going to be okay. I almost think of it as like an AA sponsor, someone who you reach out to when you're having that like dark night of the soul kind of feeling. And to match people up, you know, with intention, and to give people that peer support to just have someone to talk to.
Right.
It's what people need even when in therapy sometimes. It's just someone to talk to. To listen. Who gets it. Who gets it.
So what's the worst thing you can do when you're going through grief? Is it isolating yourself?
I mean, it's hard to say the worst thing.
I mean, obviously it's good. You already said this.
People isolate.
It's natural to kind of cozy up and womb in or whatever.
Well, I think there's 2 things. One is to disconnect from yourself. And these are things that we all do. So I don't want to say that it's wrong if anyone—
I don't mean it judgment-wise. I mean, like, if we're going through grief, anyone watching, or are going to in the future, what are the things you say, please don't resist that path and maybe do this?
Well, it's to isolate, like you said, and it's to disconnect from yourself.
And that could be like indulging in, you know, like a lot of us want to get away from pain through alcohol or drugs or some sort of self-destructive behavior.
The truth is, everyone has to deal with it at some point.
Sure.
You're somewhat prolonging it. It's not to say people aren't going to have defense mechanisms and things they do. There's no judgment on that. But I think to be in connection is the best thing you can do in some shape or form.
Connection with other people?
With other people. Whether that be your friends or your family, whether it be a yoga therapy group you find.
Or even just going out to a farmer's market or something? Like just being around people?
Yeah, I think so. But that part is tricky, because if the rest of the world is happy and having fun and you're in your deepest, darkest, that may make you feel even more isolated, like you can't.
Yeah,
so
maybe everyone's different. For me, I always call farmer's market, that's why I mentioned that, free therapy, because I'm so burned out working all the time. Usually Saturdays I crash, and it's Saturday here in Boulder, and I go there and it's all sunny and there's dogs and something about it, like, and people will be like, hey, how you doing? And the first few times I might be like, you know, but after a few minutes I'm like, I'm awful. And then I start processing it. I've been challenged because of this. And then I start talking, like,
you get better. Right.
It gets me back in.
Well, that could be the perfect medicine. And here's the other point I want to make. There is no one way that a person can get to grief. There's no right or wrong. Right. And I want to say to everyone, there is no timeline for this thing. And that's a misconception too. There's this feeling that we're supposed to be like through it at a certain place. And that is different for each of us. So what you need, the farmer's market, might be completely not what another person needs.
For someone else, yeah.
So I think it's a matter of feeling, like, where do you feel in connection? Where do you feel like you can be supported and held in your authentic experience?
Where do you feel like you can relate to it?
Yeah, where can you be yourself?
Yeah.
Where can you be that you don't have to like put on a happy face and pretend you're okay when you're not?
And often probably people put all of it on their partner, right? If they have a partner.
You can, yeah, totally.
And that might be too much.
That can be a lot. So
Yeah.
I think we need a support system. That's the most important thing.
Support system.
We need a support system. And when the Grief Support Network was first birthed, I'll share this. My first version of this thing was we were a referral network. And our goals were to help people figure out what they needed, to show them where to find it, and help them pay for it. So my vision was to like wrap my arms around people who were grieving and to walk them through. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that network is still alive and well, but what we learned through that is we need community-based programs, because that's really the heart of this, is bringing people together. But we're still trying to do those same things, is to, you know, when people are grieving, it's like the ground falls from beneath you and everything can fall apart. So even me, I have this huge network of people I knew. When I lost my son, I had no idea where to go or what I needed. I felt completely in like a fog. I couldn't really see through it. And I needed someone to like help me figure it out.
Right.
And so this is what we're here, is to be a resource to help people find their way through this dark time.
How old were you at the time?
When I lost Noah, I was 30. I had just turned 30. Yeah. And I just turned 40 this September.
Nice.
So this decade's been a hell of a decade. And I learned a lot.
Right.
And, you know, I'm genuinely happy in my life. But this work, you know, it continues to kind of feed me and inspire me, because I watch people, you know, go through really challenging times, but I watch them find so much light and beauty through the process that it's inspiring. And I think one of the messages I want to share with people is like, that you're not like, it's not like you're doomed for the rest of your life if you go through something like this. And I think I say that because I felt that way. There was part of me that was like, oh my God, is like my life ruined? How will I ever be okay? And so I want people to know is that, you know, as hard as it is, with support, with the willingness to go in and to feel your feelings and to be willing to grow and change through the process, that you'll be okay, you know, and more than okay.
Yeah.
More than okay is that there's an opportunity to actually find more gratitude and joy and really love in your life. And that doesn't mean that the grief doesn't stay as a part of who you are, and that you won't always miss the person you've lost. I mean, that I think is a forever thing. But then that becomes like a part of this beautiful tapestry of your life that we weave together. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah.
It's like a quilt.
Yeah, it's like a quilt. It becomes
like
a part
pieces
of
of memories and
Exactly.
cells and
Exactly. And then when we come together in community,
incidents.
you bring that together. And it's incredible the amount of connection that I feel when I'm in these circles with people who are grieving. And it's this shared experience. And it's like people connecting with their heart and their soul first and foremost, rather than in a social context. And I just find a lot of beauty in that.
Right, that's powerful. That would happen in meditation retreats that I would go on. People like fall in love with each other and you barely know each other.
Fall in love. And like, you know, if you were like out in the world at a party, these two people may never speak to each other.
Right.
But you connect in
it's totally
setting,
different.
you fall in love with each other and you become each other's cheerleaders. And the other thing that's unique about it is we bring people together in circle with different kinds of loss, different age groups. And what people learn is that all grief is valid. And they learn not to compare and judge one kind of grief opposed to another, which goes against some of our human
it's powerful.
instinct. And
like if I'm grieving about my dog,
I've had that.
and I go to your grief support network and someone else is grieving about their child, or
I've had that.
You know.
Yeah. And
your tendency is going to be to want to be like, oh, get out of here, or that's your dog.
Well, it is. What people learn through it
is,
like I said, they fall in love with those hearts, and they see someone who's hurting.
Right.
And it dissolves all the judgments and all the comparisons.
Right.
And even if those judgments are there in the beginning, they really learn to be more accepting of themselves and of each other.
Right.
And there's huge teachings in that. And it's a space where people learn to be vulnerable. And in our culture, this isn't something that's always easy to do.
So valuable.
So valuable.
It feels like is there any mainstream thing in the U.S. or the world that offers this?
Well, there's certainly grief support groups.
Okay.
Without the yoga, and I know there's some yoga for grief programs,
right.
And I think that's powerful too. But I think what's unique about this that I haven't seen anywhere else is the therapeutic sharing element of it, where it's not just a yoga class. And I think many people may have had the experience of going to a yoga class, and especially if something's up for you,
Yeah.
and you're in a posture and you just start to cry.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it happens all the time, right?
Yeah.
And
not to me a whole lot. I'm not proud of that. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But almost every other class I've ever been in, someone's in the back. They're always in the back row.
Well, it's what happens.
And there's like
there's
something's going on.
Exactly. And there's not a space where people can fully process that. And some people try and hold it in, or they let it out and they feel embarrassed, or the teacher doesn't know what to do, right? Or they do. You know, I'm not judging teachers at all. But what's unique about this is as those emotions are coming out, there's a space where it can be talked about and where it can be shared and witnessed and experienced. And
so you're not just hiding in the back of the room, like having your isolated but powerful experience.
It's encouraged. You know, there's an invitation for those feelings to move. And I think the invitation alone, and for people to know they could show up and be a puddle on the floor, if that's what they're feeling, that alone gives them that space to connecting with their grief. And for some people, what they need more than anything is a weekly space to just drop in on their grief and to feel what's there. So it's so easy to shove it under the rug and to try and just move on with your life. But what I find with the students I work with is when they actually address those feelings, it actually allows them to be in their life more. And the other things they can do it more fully because they're not trying to keep it at bay. It takes way more energy to actually resist the feelings than to feel them.
Yeah, and you can't be present in your actual life because you're so consumed by being caught in it and resisting it at the same time.
Totally. And here's the thing about grief, at least in my experience. I think learning to be present was the most powerful part of this for me, because in the present moment, especially when things were really acute for me, that is the only place I found some relief. The only place I could find peace was actually in the present moment. If I got really honest with myself, everything's okay. It was when I went into the past that had all my trauma, all my pain, all the things that were like, I mean, when I crawl out of my skin. And when I went into the future, it was like hard to imagine a life without Noah. And it was hard to imagine all these things. But in the present moment, it was the only place that everything was.
You could have your tea or.
Exactly. And the more I would stay there in the present, the more I could function. Didn't mean the past and the future didn't come in. But the practice of learning to be present helped me deal with my grief. But through that, it helped me to it's helped me to enjoy my life. I mean, this is a constant practice. I mean, yoga, hiking, daily medicine for me. Self-care has become a requirement, not luxury. You know, I take the first hour and a half of every day to either practice yoga or hike with my girlfriends and meditate at the top of Sanitas. And like that's how
hour and a half.
I take an hour and a half.
Hour and a half hike, or the hour and a half for the whole trip, like there and back?
Hour and a half is what I've carved out of my day. Yeah, sometimes touch more. Sometimes touch more, but that's self-care time. I actually have another tip I want to share. This is for people who may be in an acute phase, and it was something that kind of came to me through. I have to look at you. I can't look at that. I have to say.
Oh yeah, it's much better as a conversation. You can address.
Okay, cool.
But and we will answer questions in a second.
Okay. So especially the first year, it was overwhelming to feel the pain.
Yeah.
And I had a push-pull relationship with my yoga mat because I knew it was the place that I would go and feel, right?
But you didn't want to feel.
And I used to be scared that it would swallow me. And like I was afraid of drowning and going so deep down the rabbit hole that I would never come back. So especially in the beginning, I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And I have this incredible person in my life, my cousin Irene, and she gave me this tip. And she said, you need to create a small container for this, like every day. And she invited me to like set a timer or have my husband come and tell me when I've been like 15 minutes and to choose a period of time where I could delegate to going in and feeling these feelings, like literally like 15, 20 minutes max. And then
on your mat or just generally?
Well, for me, it was on my mat. It could be anything.
Okay.
But for me, like my altar, my mat was my place. And that it didn't matter what I did once I got there, you know, and some days I would roll out my mat and I would have a tantrum. I would literally just cry and scream.
Like not even do asana, just...
Nope, I would freak out. Some days I would sit quiet and meditate. Some days I would do like a rock and vinyasa class and just move and didn't matter. It was like whatever I needed. I didn't have to figure it out till I got there.
Could you feel joy?
Yeah,
sometimes.
Totally. And the other piece of this tip is that I always had to have an activity that I would do once the 20 minutes was up. So the idea was that I would have this very specific space to go in deep, and then I knew there was like an exit door.
And what was that?
Well, I would always choose something advanced. It would be something kind of mundane. I would be like, like going for a walk or calling a friend or cooking a meal or like something specific that would be a distraction, basically. That would be like, okay, this isn't about this anymore. Right. Now I'm going to go focus
Change gears.
Change gears. I'm going to focus on making lunch. Or I'm going to call a friend and I'm going to like...
Because otherwise you could just go to bed and...
Exactly. It was like I needed an off switch. Yeah. So there was something about having a timer where I literally was able to contain it, right? And the timer would go off and I'd be like, okay, I'm going to pull myself out now. It actually gave me permission and it took away some of the fear of going in. Right. And this is something that I share with people as a tip, to set that container, that time, and then to have that activity that will distract you. And to do this daily, if possible, or frequently. Because the more you do it, the more you learn how to move through it. And the more
it's kind of like massaging. Like, I have a really tight neck. If you actually massage it, you're touching in with it.
Yeah.
But then part of massage is letting go. So not avoiding it forever, because then it just gets worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, it kind of, for me, it felt like I had a way to come out, and I knew I wasn't going to get swallowed.
Right.
Because if there's no timer, if there's no sense, those feelings, once they come up, can go on forever. I also knew that I didn't have to cut it off. If something really productive was happening for me, that was my choice.
If it felt okay, if it felt workable.
Yeah.
Should we do some comments, questions?
Sure. Great.
Oh. All right. Okay. So we are on the yoga page, so there could be comments on other pages, but, well, Julia, having just lost my best lifelong friend, this helps. Caitlin, I think it's so important to show up, to have space as a yoga student where one can be authentically with where they're at and move and breathe into it and acknowledge it rather than pretending to be okay.
Yep.
Well said.
Well said.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
Genuinely,
you.
I mean that. Thank you.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah.
It means a lot to share what I know and
come back anytime.
Yeah.
Really.
Thank you. I'd love to.
And I'm afraid to say I'll probably have to visit you at some point. I was thinking about my dog full time.
You know, it's what everybody does. And this is here in the community for anyone who needs it.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, and whether it's a loss of a person or a relationship, we really honor all of it and hold space for all.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, so griefsupportnet.org.
Yes.
Great. All right. Thank you, everyone.